we will continue our conversation again with Paul. There is a lot to talk about. Water is a huge subject. So today we will focus on something you may not know of, but coming up more and more in the sort of health community, or if you're interested in health and maintaining good health, then this is something that you would probably find very useful. And the topic we will talk about today is molecular hydrogen. Paul, you are an expert in your field. We have touched on molecular hydrogen in the past 2 episodes a little bit. But what I'd like to know is, what is molecular hydrogen, and look at more at the studies that have been done and the research that has been done so far until now.
Okay. So, yes, we talked last time about how I got into the water industry, how specifically I got into understand molecular hydrogen years after I had been in the water industry. You know, the alkaline water, that's where it started for me, as we talked about prior. And, you know, as a practitioner myself, I was sharing all the information like everybody else that scientists, doctors, everybody had accepted as correct, which is that alkaline water or higher pH water buffered acids in the body and all the same story. And I just I got increasingly uncomfortable with telling that story because it doesn't make any sense. You know, there would be many times where you would be in a presentation and you could put a little bit of lemon juice, or you could put a little bit of a soda or a carbonated drink, just a few drops into the solution of alkaline water to show people that it would drop the pH. And I'm sitting there thinking, one of these times I'm doing that going, there's no buffering capacity. If I can drop a few drops into this solution and it radically changes the pH, what's happening in the stomach? We know hydrochloric acid is far more powerful than a soda. And so, or lemon juice. So I just kept getting increasingly less and less comfortable sharing the story of alkaline pH, microclustering, all this same story that everyone was talking about. And so I had another company in the silicone gel industry. We manufacture products for quadriplegic and paraplegic individuals so that they don't contract decubitus ulcers. So one of the people that worked for me at the time and worked with me in the company was a PhD chemist, and to Emory University and got his PhD in water chemistry. And so I'm sitting there one day going, you know, Chris, I'm uncomfortable with this story. Can you look at all the research here that everyone's touting as the proof that the alkaline water helps, and tell me if any of it is real or appropriate or true? And so he did. He spent that evening looking over all this paperwork I gave him, and he came back the next morning and said, Paul, none of it is true. It's not even possible. You know, and this is coming from a PhD chemist who's got his PhD in water chemistry. And he says, there's only one of these articles, these studies that you gave me that has any legitimacy, and it has to do with hydrogen. He said there's a ROS scavenging capability of hydrogen, and that's where I believe the key is to this water working. And he said to me then, but more research. I need to do more research. Do you want me to do research and come off of the projects I'm on already? Or what do you want me to do? And I said, nope, you told me everything I was thinking already, and everything confirmed what I was thinking. Let me go and do some research. And so I then began doing purely research on hydrogen. But when he told me, no, none of it's true, that resonated with me because I was already feeling that way. And then when he said hydrogen, it just felt right in my system. It resonated with me. I knew it was truth. And I immediately began talking about the bubbles that you see as not as oxygen, everyone was trying to say, but as hydrogen, and really, really went to understand the hydrogen aspect of the water and how that could help. And I have to tell you, Veronika, it was difficult because at that time, that was before all these studies came out. That was before it was understood that hydrogen was, and it was before science caught up with what was going on. And so that was the beginning, I would say, of my journey. Later, Nature Medicine obviously had a landmark study on the fact that it's a strategic antioxidant. And what did they cite? They cited the same thing that other study had cited, which is there's ROS scavenging, or reactive oxygen species scavenging ability of hydrogen, or it's a selective antioxidant. And I loved that, and went and wanted to learn more and more and more. As difficult as it was to find things, I was driven to find more. So I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And when you shared, you started to feel more and more uncomfortable. This is a similar feeling that I experienced when I was finding more information. And we touched on that last time as well, or I touched on that in the common myths video that we did. And yeah, I just couldn't continue to share something that I knew wasn't true. How many studies have been done on humans? How many have been done on the cells and the animal studies? Do you know roughly? I know altogether there is over 500 peer-reviewed articles that have been done.
Yeah, there's over 700 studies in general, but I mean, we use the word loosely, study, because some of them are just abstract. Some of them are true clinical studies that are double-blind, placebo-controlled with a crossover at the end, which is definitely the gold standard in a study. I know there are 45 human studies thus far that we have found, give or take one or two, and all the rest are animal studies, some in guinea pigs, some in mice, some in rats. It depends on what the study was on and what animals that particular institution was using. But effectively, out of the 600-700 that have been found thus far, 45 are human. And that's a study. I mean, 45 is quite a few studies showing two things. Number one, there's no damage. There's no over hydrogen effect on the body. That's not the concern. Some people say, oh, can you get too much? And in every single study, there was no issue. There's no negative impact on the body, because we're still talking about a small amount of hydrogen. When we look at diving, which we can talk about in depth in a little bit, that's a higher percentage of hydrogen being taken in the body. When we're talking about water, and we're talking about 1 part per million, or 1,000 parts per billion, or 1.5, 2 parts per million, which everyone freaks out and says, wow, that's amazing. We're talking about parts per million. It's still a very small amount of the liquid that you're drinking, but to the body, it's very powerful from a therapeutic perspective. So that's what we found. Roughly 45 studies. I think there may be one more that came after that on colon cancer last year, but so 46 studies that have been found that are human studies, and there are more coming out. That's for sure.
And we know that there are studies done on different tissues as well, from lungs to renal tissues to kidneys, cardiovascular system as well, I think. What else? Cancer, different types of studies on that as well. There have been studies done on the skin conditions as well, as far as I remember. Is there anything else you would want to add to that?
Well, definitely joints, rheumatoid arthritis and other joints. There have been studies on all kinds of things. I mean, there are some studies that are very broad. We're talking about cancer, but you can't talk about cancer as one thing, because there are so many different types of cancer. I think the best study done on colon cancer was on cancer was colon cancer. It was colon 26 induced cancer. So it was on the 26 line. And it had to do with fluorouracil. It was actually the chemotherapy drug. And it was a company wanting to see what hydrogen would not only do to cancer, but also if it would inhibit the 5-fluorouracil. That was, in my opinion, the best done study, the most professionally done study on cancer. And so that's the one that I ever cite when I talk. The other studies on diabetes, of course, I spent years in the diabetes industry with individuals with diabetes. So there are some nice studies on those with diabetes mellitus and what happens in the body from a metabolic rate or lipid and glucose metabolism perspective. Some fun ones, in my opinion, are the neurologic studies. You have bipolar, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and there are a couple studies having to do with autism that are very good, having to do with ghrelin secretions. You know, hydrogen stimulates gastric ghrelin. So for people with neurologic disorders, those are great studies. There's also one study, as I mentioned earlier, on guinea pigs with hearing loss. You know, there's a study on hearing and loss when it comes to that. There's anaerobic microflora studies showing that you're increasing anaerobic microflora in the gut. That's, in my opinion, a huge thing, because there's so many individuals that suffer from gut issues in general that can come from all kinds of sources, but it's most people that have either what's called leaky gut or just improper fermentation or other issues going on. Could be food related, could be you just don't have the right strains of bacteria. Some fun studies that are out there, you know, have to do with fatigue, sports fatigue, and other things that would go more into everyday life if you were wanting to not fatigue when you're doing sports, high level or low level sports. There's many different studies. There's even a study on sex. So there's one study I saw where the sex drive was increased. And so that's a fun one to talk about. So, you know, they've studied a lot of aspects. You know, many things have been studied. And so, you know, when you're talking about 600, 700 studies, they're studying all kinds of things. So
if a company or a university studies the molecular hydrogen, are the majority of the studies done by the industry and by those people who actually are making hydrogen water products, or are they done, the majority of them, by institutions? Now, I know, because this is something that you can create hydrogen fairly easily, this may be something that may be not very profitable, let's say, for the pharmaceutical industry. What's your view on that?
Well, at this point, all the studies have been done at the university level or hospital level or researcher level. The only study done by anyone that would have a commercial gain would be that colon cancer study that I shared with you, because what that company was looking to, and they're a pharmaceutical company again, they were looking to see what hydrogen would do if they mixed it into an IV therapy drug. And what they found was that molecular hydrogen, had a very strong anti-cancer-like activity in the body. So that's a good thing for them. You know, imagine if a drug company could get molecular hydrogen dissolved in an IV therapy drug, and therefore you would really have a larger impact on the pathology itself, and it didn't affect negatively their chemotherapy drug. This would be the perfect answer for them as a company, because they could continue promoting that drug that they feel very strongly helps this individual who's suffering from this life challenge, and at the same time put a gas in it that could be dissolved in the IV therapy drug that could, you know, and in the study it stated that it greatly affected cell apoptosis in colon 26 induced cancer. So if you're saying that you're actually helping the life cycle and you're extending the life cycle of the cells in the body, and you're having a stronger anti-cancer-like activity, and you can put that into your IV therapy drug, and at the same time, all the reported benefits of the chemotherapy of the 5-fluorouracil, in this case, could be maintained, well, you have a perfect product then. And so it would seem that the IV therapy companies or the drug pharmaceutical industry could and would greatly benefit from having molecular hydrogen in all of their drugs, because if we're talking about the fact that you have 600 to 700 studies which have therapeutic benefits on 170 human disease models, every drug on the market could benefit in some way if hydrogen was into it. Because when we really look at hydrogen, it's reducing oxidative stress. That's typically one of the huge contributors to why people contract pathology in the first place. So if we can prevent, now whether they will utilize it, we will see, but it would be beneficial because it would actually help the individual. It would help to repair their gut. And if we repair the gut, then we increase the immune system. And then guess what? You don't need all the drugs because your immune system is intact and you're not as susceptible. So who knows whether or not they will truly go there or not. It depends on which organization is pushing what. Because if we want to heal people, then we use things that heal. If we want to create a distribution model and have the perfect monetary return system next to soda pop or, you know, Coca-Cola or what have you, then you have pharmaceuticals, which is great because someone is going to have to take that for the rest of their life. So it really depends if we're looking to band-aid a problem or if we're looking at the source problem and we want to fix that actual problem, which is, of course, what I want to do and what you want to do. But that's what I would say is that the studies at this point, which actually lends to the legitimacy of our industry, is the fact that only one or two of the studies were paid for. And most of the studies, like the Nature Medicine was done by Shigeota, which I met in Japan, and he is part of a university and he's doing research. Now, he does have ties to some commercial product in a roundabout way, but the studies were not done for commercial gain and they were not paid for by entities wanting to promote a drug or a product of any kind. So after the studies were reported and the industry, the hydrogen industry starts using and benefiting from the knowledge, some of these individuals eventually could benefit commercially, but as long as they're working for these universities in these other countries, it's actually difficult. It's not like the US where universities are bought and paid for and studies are done and manipulated by it for commercial gain. You know, so we don't have those same issues in the other countries.
Let's go back to the actual molecular hydrogen. We talk about molecular hydrogen, not hydrogen ion to start with. So that's H2 or hydrogen gas. What are the different ways of getting it in the body?
Well, there are multiple ways. There's three ways. Drinking water with dissolved H2 gas in it, breathing in, or what's called inhalation, breathing in the hydrogen gas. And then, of course, you could get on the skin topically, you know, if you were to lay in a bath or something that there was hydrogen gas in that water, the body does a very good job of absorbing that hydrogen gas or coming in through the skin. So those would be the main ways. And then honestly, the best way is when your gut produces it, because that's what God intended. The body was designed to produce up to 10 liters of hydrogen per day. So we have our own hydrogen factory right in our beautiful intestinal tract. But for that to work effectively, we have to have the right bacteria strains and we have to eat the foods that are fiber rich. In other words, they need to have beneficial fibers or water soluble fibers. And when foods are broken down into short chain fatty acids, for instance, or what have you, those short chain fatty acids and beneficial fibers, when the E. coli eat them, the off-gassing or the by-process, we call it flatulence or what have you, but that's hydrogen, methane, and a number of other gases. But that hydrogen that can be produced in our gut can get in through the intestinal tract into the body to reduce oxidative stress. That's the whole design of the system. So if everyone was working perfectly and their systems were working perfectly, we may not be needed, just like pharmaceutical companies may not be needed if people's immune system and guts were working correctly, but they're typically not. And so giving them the most effective method of administration is water with dissolved hydrogen gas. So even more than breathing, and that sounds strange, but when you breathe it in, it's going into the lungs and in the blood very quickly and could go to the brain faster. But when we drink water with dissolved hydrogen, it gets into the gut and into the intestinal tract. And if we think about the fact that our body is designed to produce hydrogen in that gut or in the intestinal tract, that would make sense why it's the most effective administration. Because if we want to get hydrogen to the cells of the body, then through the intestinal tract is the best way. And so studies have shown that that is the most effective method of administration, is dissolving H2 gas in water and drinking it.
And it's a fairly simple way, I suppose, to create that effect.